9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
.30 on Thursday, the 11th of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning to you. Breaking news. Sven-Johan Eriksson has said that he is dying of cancer. He's got less than a year to live. We're going to be getting reaction to this very sad but very honest news from Sven.
And justice for the victims at last. The Prime Minister vows to right the wrongs of the post office scandal. But should Fujitsu, the firm responsible for the faulty computer software, pay the price?
Is he the ultimate virtue signaller? Is the London Mayor a complete hypocrite, flying tens of thousands of miles while preaching to everyone about climate change? I can answer that question for you.
I think we both can. And the Crown up for sale. Find out how you can get your hands on that gold state carriage as Netflix sells its props for that award-winning hit TV series.
Is there any item from the Crown that you'd want to buy?
I've stopped watching it.
Have you?
Yeah.
It sort of runs out of steam a bit, doesn't it?
It does, and I know it's a drama, so they can take any liberties they like with history, but I just find it so intensely irritating. It was so ridiculous at times. I thought, oh, I can't be bothered with this.
Well, we'll show you some of the items that you could buy if you are still a fan of The Crown and what they might cost you. We've got that and lots more this morning. First, though, your very latest news with Sam Francis.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. I'm Sam Francis. Our top story at just after 9:30. Post Office investigator Stephen Bradshaw, who held a key role in the criminal investigation of 9 sub-postmasters, will give evidence in the inquiry. Hundreds of staff were convicted, jailed and bankrupted as they were wrongly accused of theft. The Justice Secretary says Fujitsu should repay the money spent on the Post Office scandal if it's found culpable. It comes as the pressure grows on the firm behind the faulty Horizon software, which made it appear as though money was missing from shops. Alex Jorg, says if Fujitsu is to blame, ministers should launch legal action against them and claim compensation for the cost to the taxpayer. Authorities are investigating reports of armed intruders boarding a vessel off the coast of Oman this morning. It comes after the British Navy vessel destroyed several drones fired by Houthi rebels at ships in the region. The UK and US governments have said any further escalation will result in retaliation. Defence editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Fox, says the situation could escalate.
And now, one of the big changes yesterday was quantity and also quality. They attacked the main warship force for the first time in a big way. And if this goes on, they've got the target sets, they will attack Houthi bases on the Yemen mainland, on that east side of the Red Sea. You're quite right, it's an escalation.
Meanwhile, Jeremy Corbyn will join a South African delegation for the country's upcoming case against Israel, accusing them of genocide. The former Labour leader will attend the hearings in The Hague, and he's the only foreign political figure named as part of the delegation. It comes as Mr Corbyn had publicly described Hamas as a terrorist group, but accused the Israeli army of being guilty of acts of terror too. Israel's president has called the case filed by South Africa as atrocious and preposterous. And the Princess Royal has started her second day of engagements in Sri Lanka by visiting a Buddhist temple. It's part of Princess Anne's visit to mark 75 years of diplomacy with Britain. The Temple of the Sacred Tooth Relic is the most significant Buddhist temple in Sri Lanka. The Princess will then travel to Jaffna to visit northern communities and hear about the local public library. And you can hear more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now, though, more from Andrew and Beth.
Very good morning. It's 9:34 now. Sven-Göran Eriksson has revealed that he's got terminal cancer and only has a year to live.
He's the former England football manager. He announced the news saying, I have to fight as long as possible.
Eriksson managed the Three Lions for 5 years between 2001 and 2006. He stepped away from football a few months ago and at the time said there were unspecified health concerns.
Well, joining us in studio is our very own sports presenter, Paul Coyte. Paul, even someone like me who, you know, what I know about football, you could write on the back of a badly shrunken postage stamp.
Right.
Knows all about Sven-Göran Eriksson because every Sunday in the glory days of the news of the world, there he was. He transcended the sports pages because he was such a colourful figure and oddly was popular with women.
He was very popular with women and really about football, though. I mean, he came in around 2001 and...
Where did he come from?
Well, he'd been at Lazio. See, the thing is, he'd been extremely successful. Right. I mean, obviously a Swedish manager, been extremely successful over in Italy. And then England were looking after Kevin Keegan thinking, we need a winner. What do we do? And it was the first time that they'd actually decided to appoint a foreign coach. Right. He came in and even the magic of Sven-Göran Eriksson still couldn't work on England because at the time, the England side, this was this golden generation. Everybody always refers to this golden generation. The golden generation did not actually win anything. He got England to the quarterfinals of 2 World Cups and also Euros as well. So that magic did not work as far as England was concerned, but also you say about being the colourful figure that he is or was or at that time. The papers at the time, that was it. It was very much looking for anything around the England side that would then sell newspapers, and it didn't help them and it didn't help him
And
at
I
all.
suppose that his failure to succeed on the pitch, people would have probably said perhaps if he spent less time being distracted, because he always appeared to have some woman on his arm. I think Ulrika Johnson, Nancy Dallaglio, who was the lawyer, who became a celebrity in her own right.
But I don't think it's one of those things, really, Andrew, where you can look at it and say, well, if only he'd spent less time enjoying himself and spent more time in the football.
But I bet people did say that.
Well, people will always say it, but we know it's a nonsense. We know it's a nonsense because he's always going to be, he's a professional, dedicated to his work. People still have to have personal lives, amazingly. Yeah. And at the time, the newspapers were always looking for something, and it certainly distracted away from the football.
And funnily enough, how he's revealed this diagnosis is very much how he used to do his sports interviews, wasn't he? He was never a passionate figure in those interviews, very laid back, very sort of typically Swedish, actually.
Yeah.
And he's very matter-of-fact about it. He was asked by the P1 radio station in Sweden, and he said, I've got maybe at best a year, at worst a little less, or at best maybe even longer. You can't be absolutely sure. He said, it's better not to think about it.
Yeah, really. And the thing is, it's always difficult, especially now, because you want to talk about him and talk about what he's done. The man is still alive. And when you
He's
reveal...
not very old either, is he? What is he, 73?
Yeah, 75, yeah.
75.
And the thing is, when he's revealed that and said, well, possibly a year to live, we don't know. And, of course, nobody ever knows when a diagnosis comes this way. But he did reveal this on radio just this morning. And it really is, it's just really difficult to be able to talk about him in the past tense when, of course, the man is still alive now.
Yeah, extraordinary. He said he was doing a 5-kilometre run last year. He had a stroke, and then he developed cancer as well. But he's obviously still doing interviews. He's obviously still alive and around. And like he says, he wants to carry on fighting for as long as he can.
I think what it was, Bev, I think people had seen he didn't look well.
OK.
And it was one of those things where...
away from football too.
Absolutely, and he was... and where he was at Karlstad, which is... he was the sporting director there. He stepped away from that 11 months ago because of ill health.
Right.
And as often happens, if in a situation like this, someone doesn't look well, they wonder why this is. And then the speculation grew and grew and grew. So he had no choice. So, I mean, this is a situation where he would actually say, well, actually, people are saying that it's cancer. I can say that it is cancer and it's terminal.
Gareth Southgate, the famous quote about him is he said, we wanted Winston Churchill and we got Ian Duncan Smith about the half-time talks. Because he wasn't, like I say, he wasn't the dynamic character.
Well, I've spoken to players.
Gareth Southgate, who's the England manager.
Yeah, I know.
He's now the England manager.
Kettle, etc. Yeah.
You never read anything about him. He's a happily married man with his kids and he just gets on with it, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Exactly. But that's almost the contrast. When you meet Sven and when you speak to Sven, he is very mild-mannered, very quiet. He's not a very exuberant character. You wouldn't look at this man and think...
Scandinavian trait, isn't it?
Exactly. You wouldn't look at it and think as one of the footballing playboys of the world. You would never believe it. I mean...
But that was why at that time he was of such interest to the newspapers, wasn't it?
Because it was... quite understand what women saw of him.
Neither could I.
Bev, the answer is...
No, I have no idea. I mean, I looked at him and thought, you're not really my cup of tea. But Ulrika Johnson clearly found him attractive, as did Nancy Dallaglio. Thank you. Yeah, you know, he had this string of women.
I guess there's a glamour attached to being manager of the England football team.
There's always going to be a glamour, and also, you know, it was the old Paul Daniels. You know, what was it you fell in love with about the millionaire Paul Daniels? It's I don't know whether it's that. I could never actually sit here and describe why Sven-Göran Eriksson is attractive to women, but there was something going on there. But as a manager, he was a very good and very successful manager. But it's that England job that seemed to be the poison chalice with so many England managers over the years. The players are there, everything there's, the infrastructure's there, the money's there, but for some reason it still didn't work.
England manager too, didn't we? Terry Venables died quite recently, didn't he?
That's right, yeah, just a couple of months ago we lost Terry Venables.
He was a colourful figure too.
And he was a very different figure, without doubt. A very colourful figure was Terry. He was another one that was forced out of the job. El Chel, yeah, he was another one that was forced out of the job, just as he'd had his success at Euro 96. So then Kevin Keegan came along after that. Kevin Keegan was one of the very few that actually walked away from the job, and that's when Sven came in. Right. And then we have Fabio Capello, another successful manager in Italy, and then came along. He couldn't make it work, so really, we're looking at Gareth, who's probably the most successful out of all of them, going back to 66.
Yeah. Alf Ramsey.
There you go.
He used to live in the same street. My mum used to live in the same street. That's our family's claim to fame.
In Dagenham?
In Dagenham.
In Dagenham?
Yeah.
Well, I know.
There we are.
So only
put you down as a
75.
Dagenham boy. I'd never say that.
Yeah.
Only 75. Sven-Göran Eriksson says he has at best a year to live after developing cancer.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Well, hundreds of former sub-postmasters convicted in the post office scandal are now going to get their names cleared.
That's right. Yesterday, Postal Services Minister Kevin Hollinrake told the House of Commons that those wrongly convicted will get the justice they deserve.
We intend to bring forward legislation as soon as we can to overturn the convictions of all those convicted in England or Wales on the basis of post office evidence given during the Horizon scandal. The Government will, in the coming days, consider whether to include the small number of cases that have already been considered by the appeal courts and the convictions upheld.
So joining us now from Westminster is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Good morning, Catherine. This story is just going on and on and on, isn't it, about the Post Office scandal? More and more revelations coming out about who might have been to blame and who might have been benefiting from this. Do you think the government have handled this well, though, particularly yesterday?
Well, certainly, governments going back of all colours have handled this really very badly. There's a lot of politicians coming in now for plenty of criticism on all sides. But certainly it does seem like Rishi Sunak, this current iteration of the Conservative government, is moving much faster than governments normally move. And let's face it, they've been forced into this by the public outcry resulting from the ITV drama. It's not like this information is new. It's not like it hasn't been known for years and years. I mean, Alan Bates, who spearheaded the fight back, this is a problem he first encountered nearly a quarter of a century ago. But the government acting now and acting fast, and it really is quite extraordinary. They've said that the legislation to quash the convictions of these hundreds of innocent sub-postmasters will be published within weeks. The convictions will be crossed, the government say, this year, and compensation will be paid. 600,000 for those that have been convicted. And also the group of postmasters that basically went to war with the Post Office back in 2019 when the scandal was finally exposed that the Post Office were guilty and culpable. They're getting an upfront payment of 75,000. So, of course, it's to be welcomed. Some concern within the judiciary, because, of course, it's not up to the government normally to dictate to the courts what should be done. But Kevin Hollinrake, the Post Office Minister, saying that these are exceptional circumstances and victims will be asked to sign a piece of paper declaring that they didn't do anything wrong. They are aware that there may be a small number of people who actually are guilty, and that paves the way to prosecuting them at a later date. But many of the victims, I think, glad, sure, but maybe saying it's not enough. Too little, too late, perhaps. And Alan Bates himself has said, yes, it's a positive step forward, but the devil will be in the details. So let's see what happens next. But questions now about all the people who were responsible, the people at the Post Office, the people at Fujitsu that covered this up. Kevin Hollinrake yesterday talking about what the inquiries uncovered, saying evidence suggested the Post Office acted with incompetence and malevolence. Malevolence is a strong word, isn't it? But clearly, this was a massive cover-up. The state, the companies went out to cover up and to take innocent people, to drag them through the mud, destroy lives, trying to cover their own back. It really is an atrocious state of affairs.
All right, Catherine, thanks. That's Catherine Forster, who's our Westminster correspondent. We've got with us in the studio the Conservative MP for Shipley, Philip Davies. Philip, we shouldn't underestimate the scale of what was announced yesterday. This must be unprecedented for a government to say we're seizing power back from the courts and we are overturning what is about 955 verdicts of guilty against these postmasters. The government is doing it. It's never happened before, I don't think.
No, it is. It's an unprecedented step in an unprecedented situation, really. I mean, the problem with everything in the UK, we see it with the COVID inquiry, we see it with this inquiry into the Post Office. It's been set up quite a while ago. 3 years ago. Is that the wheels just move so slowly in this country. And so the government have sort of seized control of the situation. So we're not prepared to just let this keep running on forever and ever. People need some closures. People need compensation in the situations that they're in. And, you know, I don't think anybody's saying that this is an ideal way to deal with any particular situation, because there inevitably will be one or two cases where some wrongdoing did take place. But the thing is, it's the same with everything. If you want to move at speed, you've got to do it in this kind of way, and knowing that there will be one or two anomalies that get caught up in it. It's a sort of a utilitarian approach. But look, I mean, you know, it's the same with all these things. Governments have a dilemma. I mean, during COVID, you know, everyone was clamouring we need to get PPE into hospitals, into care homes and whatever, so the government sort of break the normal checks and balances to get it in there. Then later on they get criticised that they didn't do enough checks and balances. So, you know, when you're in government, you can't do right for doing wrong sometimes. But I think on this occasion, I think Rishi Sunak and Kevin Hollinrake have done exactly the right thing and have taken a grip of the situation. And I think most people will say it's the fairest way.
And the courts were basing their verdicts on essentially, Philip, a lie, which was that only the postmasters could access this Horizon IT system, so they must be responsible for these large amounts of missing money. And that was simply a lie, and Fujitsu knew that, and so did the Post Office.
Yeah, I know. I mean, what's happened is an absolute scandal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just a miscarriage of justice, it's an absolute
Appalling.
scandal. And there is obviously clearly a question of whether or not some criminal charges need to be brought for some of the people involved in this sort of conspiracy and scandal. Obviously, look, ultimately that's a matter for the police, the CPS and the courts to determine rather than politicians. But I certainly think there's a case to answer and that the police should certainly be looking into whether or not charges should be being brought.
Should we be looking as well, though, with the Conservatives' connections to Fujitsu, Philip? I mean, the Mail Online have got phenomenal deep dive into who was running Fujitsu. And between 2015 and 2018, the CEO was Michael Keegan, who is the husband of Education Secretary Gillian Keegan, photographed with Rishi Sunak all having a lovely corporate day out. This does the Conservative Party so much damage when it looks like there was some sort of back-scratching going on.
Well, I don't see that, to be honest. I mean, look, this dates back to when Tony Blair was Prime Minister. This isn't something that was introduced during the Conservative government, that the Conservative government, you know, procured this system. This goes back donkeys.
So it's just a coincidence.
Michael Keegan, as far as I know, had nothing to do with Fujitsu when all of the Horizon stuff was coming out. I think, look, Fujitsu's a massive company. They've clearly got lots of questions to answer, and they should be...
And they should be writing a big cheque.
And I'm
Absolutely.
No, I don't think anybody would dispute that. But what I'm saying is, I don't think it's fair when anything goes wrong in an organisation that you therefore sort of smear everybody who's ever worked there or everybody who's ever linked to that company. I think, you know, let's treat each issue on its merits, and I don't think there's any suggestion that anybody was covering anything up in the government because Michael Keegan was...
They're big donors to the Conservative Party, though. I mean, Richard Tice was on here yesterday saying that Fujitsu have given £400,000 to the Conservatives.
Well, it's not doing them much good at the moment, is it? I mean, I don't think... if you've got any evidence that anybody's made any decisions based on that, then fine. But as far as I'm concerned...
I just want people to be asking those sorts of questions.
Well, look, I don't think I think that's just a smear. You know, that's just a groundless smear, isn't it, really, without any basis. So, look, let's stick to the facts and the evidence rather than just making sort of wild smears.
On Labour, it was interesting after Rishi Sunak talked about this in the Commons yesterday at Prime Minister's Questions that Keir Starmer changed the subject. Is this because he's uncomfortable with the fact Nigel Farage raised the issue about the fact, as Director of Public Prosecutions, he was Director of Public Prosecutions for quite a few years when these postmasters and postmistresses were being arrested and charged, he didn't intervene, and he could have done. He could have done. There was a way he could have used his... Is there some questions that he has to answer on this?
Look, I don't think any political party comes out of this smelling of roses. I think that's the thing. You know, every political party has got something that they should have done better. With hindsight, they should have done better. I wouldn't accuse anybody of willfully doing things wrong. But when they look back, they'll think I should have done something differently. You know, and I think Keir Starmer is probably in that camp of people who will look back and think, I'm pretty sure I should have done something differently. But that's, you know, it's always easy with the benefit of hindsight. I don't think we should be too critical of people. I think the people who come out best from all of this are Kevin Hollinrake, the minister, who's actually campaigned on this issue for years when he was a backbencher. This is not just him acting as a minister. He's campaigned on this. I think Kevin Hollinrake and obviously the Prime Minister now, Rishi Sunak, who's clearly backing what Kevin Hollinrake wants to do.
And a Labour MP, Kevin Smith, who you know Kevin up in Durham, we had him on the programme this week. Kevin Jones, he's been on this as well for years and years.
Exactly, absolutely.
It's interesting, because people say, why didn't the press get involved in this? Well, my newspaper, The Demo, first wrote about this in 2013. We have been banging on about this for a long time. It's appalling, really, isn't it? It took this TV drama to captivate and electrify the country, outraging people, actually, which has finally forced the whole collective will of Parliament to act. And that's shameful, really.
It's amazing how these things work. I mean, some of us in Parliament, we battle on particular issues for years and years and years where we think there's an absolute scandal and you can't get any traction for it at all. And then, you know, along comes ITV and all of a sudden, you know, but that's just the way of the world, isn't it?
Nigel also talked last night about he had a fight with Danny Kruger, your colleague, because Danny Kruger says to Nigel Farage that the Reform UK, of which is he the president? He's the president,
yes,
isn't he, Nigel?
honorary president.
Nigel is the honorary president.
You're going to split the Tory vote and cost the Tories seats at the next election. And Nigel had said, I think the day before, Labour will be in power for a decade. What do you make about reform? In fact, I think we've got. I think we can watch it actually. This is Nigel having a fight with Danny Kruger.
But the problem that you are, I'm afraid, presenting with your colleagues in reform at the next election is that you are presenting an alternative Conservative, small c Conservative vote to a party to those voters.
I've heard this for 30 blooming years.
I know, but
don't vote UKIP.
It's true.
And if you hadn't voted UKIP, we'd still be members of the European Union. You lot would never have got our independence back. It would never have happened.
But that has happened. Now we've achieved that.
Well, now
we've achieved that. Now you're fighting on other battles.
Now what we've got to do?
Now is support.
We've got to get rid of
Conservative candidates.
You've given us Broken Britain. Labour offer us no alternative.
What are you going to give us? Labour?
No. Complete reform of the whole political system.
What do you make of that? And because you're talking about the voting system, but
well, I mean, look, there's merits in what both are saying to a certain extent. Look, the thing is that, and I've engaged in this debate before in a probably ham-fisted way, but the point is that as Conservatives, it's no good blaming the voters or blaming the Reform Party for the situation that we're in. We're not in a situation that we are in the polls because of the Reform Party.
No.
We're in the situation we're in because of us.
Because of being incompetent.
Because we haven't been, to most people's view, conservative enough.
I agree with you.
That's the issue. So the solution is in our own hands. It's not about going around and then blaming the Reform Party. We've got to win these voters back ourselves by what we do. And I think Rishi Sunak's got a good programme. To it's about we've got to sort out immigration. We've got to sort out the economy. There's no victory for us at the election without sorting out immigration. So we've got to do that ourselves. There's no good blaming anybody else.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the key point is, we've got to persuade people at the general election that they're better off having a Conservative government than a Labour government. It will be one or the other, and that's what our job is, to persuade people they need.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time, Philip. Don't go anywhere. A lot more to come this morning, particularly about Sadiq Khan being an absolute hypocrite. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Another chilly one out there today. Again, most of us will be dry. Quite a lot of cloud around. Well, we've had the clear skies in the south. It's another frosty start and a frosty clear start in north-western parts of Scotland. But elsewhere, we've seen quite a bit of cloud again. It is producing one or two light showers here and there over parts of northern England, but not really amounting to very much. As I said, most places will be dry. The feel of the day, though, will really depend on that cloud. If you're stuck under it, even though temperatures will be a little higher at 7 or 8 Celsius, it'll feel pretty cold once more. But in the sunny spells, of course, South Wales, South West England and Western Scotland may not feel too bad, although the frost will come back pretty quickly here through this evening and overnight. Elsewhere, we'll keep a lot of cloud. That should help to prevent a frost, so it won't be as cold tonight across the south as it was last night. Most places staying above freezing thanks to that cloud, whereas it'll probably be colder across central Scotland, southern Scotland and Northern Ireland with more of a frost. Maybe some fog patches are possible too, and they could be slow to clear where they do form. Through Friday, we'll keep a lot of cloud, I suspect, over the Midlands, eastern England, and a much cloudier day in southern England as well. Again, some good spells of sunshine for Wales, particularly in the west, and probably a brighter day in eastern Scotland. Temperatures struggling here, 2 or 3 degrees at best, 5 or 6 further south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Thursday, the 11th of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
Sven-Goran Eriksson, the former England manager, reveals he's dying of cancer. He's less than a year to live. We'll be getting reaction to this incredibly sad news.
Justice for the victims. The Prime Minister vows to right the wrongs of the post office scandal, but should Fujitsu, the firm responsible for the faulty computer software, pay the price?
And is he the ultimate virtue signaller? The London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, complete hypocrite, flying tens of thousands of miles on climate change conferences while preaching to everybody about climate change.
And The Crown, well, it's up for sale. Find out how you could get your hands on the Gold State carriage as Netflix sells off its props for the hit series. And do you have children in your life, whether they're grandchildren or your own children, who clean their teeth or who know how to clean their teeth? Because Labour are going to teach them how to do it. Is that a parent's job?
And that is going to be in a major speech today by the Leader of the Opposition, no less. More important things to talk about.
Yeah, and talking about making health visitors, empowering health visitors to vaccinate children in the house so they don't have to go to the surgery. It's all very controversial, but is it blurring the line between the state and the family? In my opinion, it definitely is. What do you think? GBviews at gbnews.com. First, though, the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. I'm Sam Francis. The headlines at 10. Well, first to some breaking news just coming into us here in the newsroom. By-elections have been triggered to fill Westminster's vacant seats for both Wellingborough and Kingswood. Peter Bone lost his Wellingborough seat after being suspended from the Conservative Party when an investigation found that he'd committed acts of bullying and sexual misconduct. Mr Bone, though, rejected the findings of that report. Elsewhere, former Minister Chris Skidmore resigned from his Kingswood seat this week over the opposition to the government's green policies that he had. The respective councils will shortly set a date for the votes to take place. Meanwhile, the Justice Secretary says that Fujitsu should repay the money spent on the post office scandal if it's found culpable. It comes as pressure grows on the firm behind the faulty Horizon IT software, which made it appear as though money was missing from shops. Hundreds of staff were convicted, jailed and bankrupted as they were wrongly accused of theft. Alex Chalk says the government will secure proper recompense for those affected once the statutory inquiry concludes its findings. Mr Chalk also added that if Fujitsu is found culpable, ministers could launch legal action against them and claim compensation for the cost to the taxpayer. Authorities are investigating reports of armed intruders boarding a vessel off the coast of Oman this morning. It comes after a British Navy vessel destroyed several drones fired by Houthi rebels at ships in the region. The UK's Maritime Trade Operations Authority received reports of several intruders dressed in military-style uniforms and masks in the early hours, and they say they have since lost contact with the vessel. The UK and US governments have said that any further escalation will result in retaliation. Well, defence editor of the Evening Standard told GB News earlier that things could get worse.
Now, one of the big changes yesterday was quantity and also quality. They attacked the main warship force for the first time in a big way. And if this goes on, they've got the target sets, they will attack Houthi bases on the Yemen mainland, on that east side of the Red Sea. You're quite right, it's an escalation.
Jeremy Corbyn is in The Hague with a South African delegation for the country's case against Israel. They're accusing them of genocide. The former Labour leader is the only foreign political figure named as part of the delegation to be attending those hearings. It comes as Mr Corbyn publicly described Hamas as a terrorist group, but accused the Israeli army of also being guilty of acts of terror. Israel's president called the case filed by South Africa atrocious and preposterous. Political editor for Jewish News, Lee Harpin, told GB News this morning it's an impossible situation for Israel.
It's an impossible situation almost for Israel. And there's no doubt Israel does need to fight back against Hamas because, what would we do here in this country were missiles constantly flying in? Would we just sit back and say, well, we can't fight that force because we might kill some innocent people? Unfortunately, this is the devastating consequence of a horrendous conflict.
Well, as we've been hearing in the last few minutes, former England boss Sven-Göran Eriksson says he has a year to live after being diagnosed with cancer. The 75-year-old Swede was the first foreign coach to manage England. He led a golden generation of footballers, including David Beckham, Steven Gerrard, Wayne Rooney and Frank Lampard. He also led the England team to the quarter-finals of the 2002 and 2006 World Cups and the 2004 Euros. The 75-year-old told Swedish radio that he has, at best, a year to live. Meanwhile, in the US, an airline has cancelled all flights on Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft until Saturday. That's as it waits for approval to get planes back in the air. It's after an Alaska Airlines flight had to make an emergency landing when an unused cabin door broke away mid-air on Friday. The US has grounded 171 of the MAX 9s since the incident. They say that's because all planes are installed with the same panel. 177 people were on board that flight on Friday, and luckily no one was hurt. The findings are being treated as a quality control issue. And the Princess Royal has started her second day of engagements in Sri Lanka by visiting a Buddhist temple. It's part of Princess Anne's visit to mark 75 years of diplomacy with Britain. The Temple of the Sacred Tooth Relic is the most significant Buddhist temple in Sri Lanka. The Princess is then set to travel to Jaffna to meet northern communities and hear about the local public library. She'll also meet with members of the charity working to make former civil front lines safe. That's the latest from the GB Newsroom for now. I'll be back in half an hour. For more, we're on TV, digital radio and your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News. Now, though, back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. So hundreds of innocent former sub-postmasters convicted in the post office scandal could have their names, well, will have their names cleared this year.
Questions are being asked about how such a massive miscarriage of justice could have occurred. Well, it wasn't so much undetected, but wasn't resolved before.
So joining us now is GB News presenter Nigel Farage. Good morning, Nigel. Always good to see you. You have really got behind this campaign for the postmasters in the way that you do for normal people. Why has it taken this ITV docudrama, Nigel, to put this front and centre of the media and people's minds?
This is a classic case of the great and the good, those with knighthoods, CBEs, peerages, wealthy people, a political establishment that chose not to listen in any way at all. And yes, it did take a docudrama on ITV, and a very well-produced one too, I must say, to tug at the heartstrings of the public and to make them realise that once again, the little people are being ignored. And that's why the public feeling and momentum behind this campaign is just as strong as it was during the expenses scandal and indeed during the Brexit referendum. And it shows the gulf that exists in this country between the governors and the governed. At last, it would appear that some recompense is coming, though I suspect when it comes for the fight for genuine compensation, this may well take a long time, by which many of those who deserve to be compensated will probably have died.
Yeah, and of course, Nigel, we know 4 people committed suicide who are linked to this scandal. People have lost homes, life savings, and those people who have been compensated, often a lot of the money they got was gobbled up by hugely expensive legal fees because the post office used such expensive lawyers to try to crush these people.
Yes, I mean, not just legal fees, Andrew. Many people had to sell their houses. So if you sold your house 20 years ago and you've been renting for the last 20 years, think what that's cost you. So, I mean, this really has hurt people in the most extraordinary way, and their extended families, let alone their reputations, their standing within their local communities. But, you know, we've had nearly 14 years of Conservative government. They did nothing. We have a Labour leader who was the Director of Public Prosecutions at the time this reached a peak, and we now know that the Crown Prosecution Service took some of those cases themselves. He didn't intervene. And a Liberal Democrat leader who, you know, was Postal Services Minister again during the peak period. I mean, you know, one can't point the finger of blame at any party in particular. This is the establishment that ignored the little people.
It's got echoes, actually, Nigel, of the debanking scandal, hasn't it? There's you know, I presume you're starting the script on the debanking docudrama for ITV, because I think that's another story. This idea, as you say, of the establishment and the normal person on the street, and the gulf between the two being bigger than it has ever been. Is that partly why you think this docudrama has caught the imagination? It's also because it is just historical. It's incredibly unwoke. There are no characters shoehorned in because they're having gender identity issues, or there's none of that sort of shoehorn that the British public just don't want to see. It's just real life.
Yeah, it's real life, it's real people, it's real families. I mean, you know, remember, you know, that actually the local postmaster or postmistress is a respected figure of the communities. My village in which I live, we lost the post office a few years ago with really quite devastating consequences for the local community, for social interaction that takes place in the village. So, yeah, it's just about ordinary folk, and they've been trampled on, and at last they're getting their hearing, and the British public is very, very firmly behind them. And, you know, you draw the parallel with debanking. I mean, who were the people that have been hurt by debanking? Not me, because I was big enough and ugly enough to fight back. But I can tell you, there are tens of thousands of small businesses all over this country who were closed down by the banks with no good reason whatsoever and who've lost their businesses. So the parallels run through so many things.
Can we ask you as well, Nigel, you mentioned Keir Starmer, there's many things that are not right with this country, a lot of things to be fixed. He's going to make a speech today where he's going to unashamedly embrace what he calls the nanny state, which is going to involve teaching 3 to 5-year-olds how to brush their teeth properly and to send health visitors into people's homes to vaccinate children. Is this the place of a government?
No, not at all. And what Keir Starmer is doing is taking the massive intrusion into our lives at every level that we've seen under a Conservative government and just taking it further. I mean, the truth is, there isn't much to choose between them. Yes, of course, it's a step way too far. And I'm sure that, you know, Bev and other parents will say this is just ridiculous. We don't need to be treated like this. But don't think the state has reduced in size in the last 14 years either. And that perhaps is one of the big problems that people face. Here we are at the start of a general election year, and you've really got to ask yourself, what are the fundamental philosophical differences between these two parties? And they're very small.
I think actually on the teeth cleaning thing, I think it's a little bit more, I'm a bit conflicted about it, I can't lie, because clearly the children aren't learning to clean their teeth at home, they're not being taught to clean their teeth. And in a way, it's not the job of a teacher, and actually Wes Streeting was being grilled on this morning on various media outlets, and he said that actually some of the teachers will have to teach the children. I mean, if you've been to got your degree and you've qualified as a teacher, I think you're the one who's going to be feeling a little demeaned about the fact that you're then teaching a 4-year-old how to use a toothbrush. But in terms of doing something for the next generation, Nigel, is the impulse not right in terms of health? I'd quite like to see him tackle the food industry, I can't lie.
Well, look, I mean, dental hygiene clearly is very important, and the British famously have some of the worst teeth in the world. I think we're rather better than we used to be. Look, you know, of course we want parents to do these things, but I mean, I wouldn't actually, Bev, have any objection, you know, with people going into reception classes at primary school. I don't see why age 5 you can't give kids basic lessons about personal hygiene, teeth cleaning. I wouldn't find that objectionable at all. It's just the idea that Keir Starmer wants to tell us how to clean our teeth. That's the quite objectionable. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. The fact that they're claiming it as a policy and their ownership of this idea rather than just introducing it into the curriculum in terms of your personal hygiene lessons. What's going on with reform, Nigel? Are you going to stand for them or not? Come on, it's what the public want.
I don't know.
Come on, you must know.
No, I don't know. I honestly and truthfully don't know. What I will say is this, that, you know, Richard Tice is working blooming hard at reform. He is utterly determined. When he says he won't do sweetheart deals with Conservatives, he means it. Remember, we did this in 2019. We helped them get an 80-seat majority, and they have completely blown it. They've blown trust. They've damaged the country hugely. They've not kept their promises. And slowly but surely, through organic growth, reform's at 11%. It was polling third in a couple of opinion polls this week. And all I know for certain is that reform is going to get many, many millions of votes, maybe more millions than we can even believe at this moment in time. As for me, well, look, I'm the honorary president of it. I was the founder of it. I believe in what it says and what it stands for. And by the way, it wants to reverse the size of a state, a level of control over our lives, and it genuinely does. I'll be honest with you, I rather enjoy my work at GB News. I rather enjoy my life at the moment. I spent nearly 21 years in the European Parliament. For me to go back and throw myself into that world again on the eve of my 60th birthday, it's not necessarily top of my bucket list. And that doesn't mean I won't do it.
The breaking news this morning is that by-election in Wellingborough, where Ben Habib will stand for reform, has been triggered. Are you going to be there putting leaflets through doors, Nigel?
Look, I would be very surprised if I didn't pop up and give Ben a bit of support at some point in the next few weeks.
Very interesting. All right, Nigel. That's our very own Nigel Farage. Thanks for joining us. And Nigel did refer earlier to the Lib Dem leader, Sir Ed Davey, who had this to say about his tenure as Postal Affairs Minister in the coalition government, which was between 2010 and 2012.
I wish I'd known then what we all know now. The Post Office was lying on an industrial scale to me and other ministers.
And Lib Dem, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And a Lib Dem spokesperson had this to say in response: Ed bitterly regrets the Post Office for not honest with him at the time. His heart goes out to the families caught up in this miscarriage of justice, and he's going to cooperate with the inquiry to get to the bottom of what went wrong.
And on the accusation that Ed Davey made £275,000 acting as a consultant for the legal firm Herbert Smith Freehills, who was acting for the Post Office, a Liberal Democrat spokesperson had this to say: Ed was one of the many ministers who was misled and lied to by the Post Office. He's always been clear that the earnings from the work he did advising on climate change issues were used to fund the lifelong care for his severely disabled son. Ed had no knowledge that HSF held his account and never had any conversations about the Post Office or Horizon scandal at any occasion with HSF.
And to Keir Starmer's people say this about his time at the Crown Prosecution Service in relation to the Post Office scandal. During Keir's time as Chief Prosecutor, no cases relating to Horizon were brought to his desk. The scandal that emerged is one of the worst miscarriages of justice in British history, and Labour's been calling for swift exoneration and compensation for the victims. It's vital all action is taken to right these wrongs.
They go on. Labour's focus is on playing our part in making sure this injustice is never repeated.
They're all running around, aren't they? Now to Northern Ireland and the continuing saga at Stormont. There is still no devolved government. 2 years now without a devolved government. Who better to explain all this than the former First Minister herself, Arlene Foster. Nigel Farage talked about people with MBEs and CBEs. Well, you've got the lot. You've got a Damon
It's all your fault, Arlene.
It's all my fault, yeah. Well, it usually is. It usually is. I was just thinking about the wrongful convictions, and yesterday in the Lords, Lord Offord was talking about the number of wrongful convictions. There were 983.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and 24 of those are in Northern Ireland, 76 in Scotland. But what has been announced by the government for England and Wales in terms of the quashing of convictions doesn't apply automatically.
I was going to ask, because you've got a different legal system.
Because we have two separate legal systems in Scotland and in Northern Ireland. The compensation will come because it's reserved, so it comes from Treasury. So that'll come directly to people in Northern Ireland who've been affected and people in Scotland. But the quashing of the convictions has to happen in both of those jurisdictions.
Now, does that mean you need the Stormont Parliament to be brought back to quash those convictions?
So it's one of the issues. It's one of the issues that is there.
I mean, there are many reasons why it should be recalled, but this makes it even more pressing.
Well, it adds to the pressure. It adds to the pressure, there's no doubt about that. And next Thursday is the so-called deadline in terms of the emergency legislation. So Chris Heaton-Harris, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, either has to have more emergency legislation or call an election. I don't think he's going to call an election, and I don't think Stormont will be back by next Thursday. And next Thursday is also the day when we have a huge public services strike in Northern Ireland.
Right. And what's that about?
It's about pay and conditions, and the Secretary of State has acknowledged that that needs to be settled. He's put money on the table. Some people say it's not enough money because it's not recurring every year, but he's put money on the table and he says, you only get it if Stormont comes back, which I think is disgraceful, actually, because if people have a right to pay, it shouldn't be in relation to who's in charge. They should get the money.
But again, this shows the impotence of what's happening in Northern Ireland. That there's this huge strike and there's no Parliament to negotiate or to condemn. It's an extraordinary position we're in.
It is.
Remind people, Arlene, why the power sharing, why the Stormont Parliament was dissolved effectively.
So in Northern Ireland, we have a mandatory coalition under the Belfast Agreement. That means that Sinn Féin, the DUP, the SDLP, the Ulster Unionist Alliance Party are all in the government, if you like. So it's a mandatory coalition. And if whoever's in the First Minister's and Deputy First Minister's office, if one of those people resign, as Paul Givan, as the then First Minister, did back in February of 2022, then the whole thing collapses and it stops. It was the same when I was First Minister and the Deputy First Minister then, Martin McGuinness, resigned and Stormont was down for 3 years on that occasion over Irish language. And that should have been resolved a lot sooner than it was. But the issue this time is around Brexit. Of
course it is.
And it's around the Windsor Framework. And the fact that there are checks coming from Great Britain into Northern Ireland. And what unionism is saying is that that needs to be sorted out in terms of the constitutional position of Northern Ireland within the UK, and of course in relation to trading, which should be an internal UK market.
Because you're effectively still under the yoke of the European Union.
Yes, we are.
But you have absolutely no accountability or power because you've got no MEPs.
So we get laws, we get regulations, which we have to abide by if you're manufacturing in Northern Ireland, but we've absolutely no say in them because they come from Europe. And that, to me, is a deficiency in democracy, a very big deficiency in democracy.
It's sort of intractable at the moment, isn't it, Arlene? All
and
that,
it's very complicated.
Very
and
complicated. But in the meantime, the people of Northern Ireland are being shortchanged, aren't they?
Yeah.
We want your opinion on this Starmer speech from today about the fact that he's going to be sending health visitors, not health ministers, into people's homes to vaccinate the children and teach them how to clean their teeth. You're a mum. What do you make of it?
It's the job of a parent, isn't it? I mean, this is very much, and he says in terms that he will defend the nanny state.
He does. He's embracing it.
You are actually encroaching into the private space of family life.
Yeah.
And I, as someone who believes that private family life is sacred and you know, parents have the prime responsibility, think it's absolutely ridiculous that he's making a speech about cleaning teeth. However, I will say this, there are parents who struggle. There are parents who become parents very early in life, and they need help. And I think there's a way to do that.
And you know what's interesting? It's also parents who become parents late in life, because those are the ones often whose own mothers, the ones who pass down that knowledge, the ones who say, well, come on, this is how, you know, clean their teeth at 2 years old. The older parents often need the support because their own mothers have passed away by the time they've become parents.
But I mean, you talked about teachers. I wouldn't have a problem with a teacher showing a card, doing part of the lesson, and this is how you brush your teeth, this is how you clean behind your ears. I can still remember, I was in a Catholic school, the nuns telling us how to wash behind your ears and wash between your toes. What was the problem with that?
There's no problem with that, but it's not the teachers aren't having to supervise you doing it every morning, is the point. And I think one of the teachers' unions, interestingly, have said, well, OK, we hear what you're saying, but I'm not sure it's the job of a teacher to be standing watching you wash your teeth every day.
And it does set that precedent, doesn't it? And it sort of, like I said, blurs that boundary.
But also, there's so many other big issues that need resolving. And here we have the leader of the opposition, who's almost looks like he's going to be Prime Minister in 9 months' time, banging on about kids
cleaning your teeth.
Is he going to talk about the fact that it's very difficult to get to see an NHS dentist? And
Impossible.
that started under Blair.
Yeah.
That's more important, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually GPs are going in that direction now as well.
Yeah. Rishi Sunak did a tweet earlier in the week when he said, you know, I will protect your children's future, I will build a better future for your children. But he didn't put any meat on the bones of that, and that's what I'm looking for. And so in a way, as a mum, I quite like, at least I like the fact that children and children's health is being discussed, because it feels like Rishi Sunak doesn't even discuss it.
Well, Andrea Leadsom has done some pretty good work on early years, and I applaud the work she's doing on early years, actually, and she intervenes and has basically said those 2 first years are so important, and you really need to concentrate on that, because if you are able to get children into a way of thinking and doing things when they're very, very young, then that carries through, and they have better mental health, they have better physical health. And so she is doing a lot of good work, and I noticed she's gone back now in as health minister again, not as Secretary of State, but as a junior health minister, and I think that work is very, very important.
OK. All right, lovely to see you, Arlene, as usual. Now, still to come this morning, Netflix is selling off all of its prop from the hit series The Crown. And what would you bid for if you got the chance? Email us, let us know. Keep it clean. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. The time is 10:28. And we want to say something to our fabulous viewers and listeners.
To say thank you, because we are hitting record numbers here at this time of the day, here in GB News. But you lot are making this show very successful. I mean, we don't want to brag, but obviously...
Yes, she does.
Well, we do. We don't mind.
It's obviously all about her.
It's all about me. I don't think so. Let us know what you think of the show. Let us know why you're watching it. gbviews@gbnews.com. Tell us what you don't like about Andrew. Tell us what you don't like about Andrew. And I will read them out as long as you keep them nice.
And we want to know why you're switching to us, what you like about us, switching from our so-called rivals. And just remember, it's Andrew Pearce is the reason you're watching.
Now, you've been getting in touch home about the post office scandal, and Jordan has said, here's a thought. Did the judges who prosecuted these people realise how could 700 and odd people lose all that money and not think that something was odd about these happening overnight?
Well, that is why there's criticism of Davies, Post Office Minister, and Keir Starmer as Director of Public Prosecutions, because that is the fact. Why would suddenly... These people who normally bastions of decency and stalwarts of their communities suddenly being prosecuted in hundreds. There were over 950 prosecutions.
And it was, do you know what, Andrew? It's a real abuse of good British people's honest and genuine nature. The fact that some of these postmasters paid back money from their... Oh, a lot of them did.
Many of them did.
Because otherwise they were going to have a criminal prosecution. And even though they knew they'd done nothing wrong, they still remortgaged their houses. That blows my mind.
I spoke to one yesterday. He's in his 70s. He repaid £18,000. He accepted a criminal conviction. He got a suspended sentence because his lawyer said, you're not going to win. If you don't accept this, you could go to prison.
It's extraordinary.
He's got his money back and he's had a pardon already. But how appalling.
You see, Leslie has got in touch and she says, he or she says, I have, during this fiasco, never heard anyone say, if these people have stolen the money, how much in total and where is it? It must be traceable by an audit. It's such a good point.
The fact is, the money didn't exist.
I know, but then surely you would think that if this is the point, so presumably those accused, their bank accounts were also gone through, and if they were accused of stealing £26,000,
where did it go?
Where was it?
What did they spend it on? That's the other thing. And some people are saying it's unfair to pursue Paula Vanels, who was the chief executive of the Post Office. I think it's your view to a certain extent.
I think I've changed my mind on that as more facts have emerged.
Yeah, well, because she's given back her CBE. Look, she got millions of pounds in bonuses, and it based on figures that were inflated by the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, probably millions, paid back by postmasters and postmistresses.
That never existed.
And it was a lie.
Yeah, it was all a lie. And Jane said, why isn't anyone asking how the Horizon system can still be running in the Post Office?
We have to remember there is a public inquiry ongoing, but like all public inquiries in Britain, it's been going since 2020, and it's not going to finish any time soon.
My local postmaster tells me that he still regularly has inconsistencies, which he simply makes up to balance the books. There must surely be numerous complaints still to come while these employees are forced to use a clearly faulty system.
Shocking.
Extraordinary.
It is
and
shocking.
actually, and you know, the point I was just making before with Nigel about the fact that why is this caught the public imagination? Well, because it isn't a woke story, particularly with the TV dramatisation of it. Why are people enjoying it so much? Real people, real drama, nothing shoehorned in for the sake of being fashionable.
A lot of people think, that could be my postmaster, that could be my postmistress, because people have a relationship with them.
It's also just about the fact that you think that could be me, because any of us who have sat on a helpline, a digital helpline, trying to get through, whether it's to your gas provider or, you know, the people who give you your broadband, and that frustration of computer says no, that's what this story sums up so beautifully. And we all feel it. We feel that fear of that kind of dystopian future where you can't talk to a human being.
Now, moving on, how would you like to own a piece of TV royalty? The makers of the hit Netflix series The Crown, they're auctioning off hundreds of props and costumes from the set.
And if you don't want to buy, you have a chance to see it all for yourself in a free exhibition opening in London today.
I don't want to buy it.
So, look, we're just seeing some pictures now. If you're listening on the radio, we're seeing some of the outfits, the very classical royal outfits. The carriage was there. Beautiful dresses. You'd look lovely in that green one, Andrew. And look at that very nice hat. Lots of picture frames with royal people. Obviously, these aren't the originals. This is all the stuff from the Netflix drama series. Well, joining us now is royal commentator and historian Rafe Haydel-Mancu. Rafe, have you got your eye on any particular items? I think I could see you going up and down your high street in that golden carriage. It would suit you down to the ground.
Yes, if I park that in front of my house, it'll get the neighbours talking for sure, I think. My dream purchase, I suppose, would be the brilliant copy of the coronation chair in which the monarch sits to be crowned. You know, just that we could have our interviews with me sitting in this chair going forward. But that's £10,000 to £20,000. So I think a more realistic bid for me probably would be the Queen Mother's cocktail set at 60 quid.
Yeah, Rafe, I'm just a bit curious about this. Why would people want to buy props from a drama? It's TV, it's make-believe, it's not real royal memorabilia, it's not something that was ever touched by Her Majesty the Queen or Prince Philip. Why would anybody want it?
Well, because it's the next best thing, isn't it? And, of course, we know that there's a huge industry in royal memorabilia, royal mugs, plates. No member of the royal family has ever touched any of those tea towels, for example. But what we're talking about, you have to remember, of course, The Crown, the series, was the world's most expensive drama series. And the props were made by the Oscar-winning production team of Martin Childs and his team of master craftsmen. So we're talking about the very best royal replicas that have ever been made and probably ever will be made. And, of course, the Crown won many of its awards for set production and costume design. So if you actually are a staunch royalist, or you just want a touch of majesty to colour up your house, I think there's a rather nice things to buy if you got the money to do so.
It's one for the fans, isn't it, Rafe? It really is. I'm sorry it's so brief this morning. We're a little bit short on time, but I'm sure you're about to hot-foot it down to that exhibition anyway. Now, after the news, we're going to be talking about Sadiq Khan, and what a mess, really, he's made of London. After your morning's news this morning, it's emerged that more than 1,000 people have been killed in the capital since he became more. First, though, here is Sam.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. The headlines just after 10:35. Well, in the last hour, we've heard that by-elections have been triggered to fill Westminster's vacant seats for both Wellingborough and Kingswood. Peter Bone lost his Wellingborough seat after being suspended from the Conservative Party when a parliamentary investigation found that he'd committed acts of bullying and sexual misconduct. Mr Bone, though, rejected the findings of that report. Meanwhile, former Minister Chris Skidmore resigned from his Kingswood seat this week over his opposition to the government's green policies. He now says that he won't support the Tories. The respective councils will shortly set a date for votes to take place. Meanwhile, the Justice Secretary says Fujitsu should repay the government for all money that's been spent on the Post Office scandal if it's found culpable. It comes as the pressure grows on the firm behind the faulty Horizon IT software, which made it appear as though money was missing from shops. Hundreds of staff were convicted, jailed and bankrupted as they were wrongly accused of theft. Alex Chalk says the government will secure proper recompense for those affected once the inquiry concludes its findings. Mr Chalk also added that if Fujitsu is found culpable, ministers could launch legal action against them and claim compensation for the cost to the taxpayer. As we've been hearing, former England boss Sven-Göran Eriksson says that he has a year to live after being diagnosed with cancer. He was the first foreign coach to manage England, leading a golden generation of footballers, including David Beckham, Steven Gerrard, Wayne Rooney and Frank Lampard. He also led England to the quarter-finals of the 2002 and 2006 World Cup and the 2004 Euros. The 75-year-old has said to Swedish radio he has, at best, a year to live. Authorities are investigating reports of armed intruders boarding an oil ship off the coast of Oman this morning. It comes after a British Navy vessel destroyed several drones fired by Houthi rebels at ships in the region. The UK's Maritime Trade Operations Authority received reports of several intruders dressed in black military-style uniforms and masks in the early hours. They say they have since lost contact with that vessel. The UK and US governments have said any further escalation will result in retaliation. And the Princess Royal has started her second day of engagements in Sri Lanka by visiting a Buddhist temple. It's part of Princess Anne's visit to mark 75 years of diplomacy with Britain. The Temple of the Sacred Tooth Relic is the most significant Buddhist temple in Sri Lanka. The Princess will then travel to Jaffna to meet northern communities and hear about the local public library there. She will also meet the members of the charity working to make a former civil front line safe. And as ever, you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at this morning's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2737 and €1.1620 euros. The price of gold is £1,595 and 2 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is currently at 7,662 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Good morning. Still to come, the roommate of the man thought to have taken his own life on the Baby Stockholm says that he knows of others struggling to cope with the situation on board. Is the barge a risk to the safety of asylum seekers? Andrew Pearce, I saw that look in your eye. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
You're with Britain's News, I'm on GB News with Andrew Pearson-McTurner. The noise you clear on the side was Carol Malone, who's arrived as usual, talking, as she always does.
Is there something? What does an itchy nose mean? Does it mean you're going to get cross?
Well, you're always
Itchy nose.
You're permanently cross. Scarlett
Get cross
McGuire's
with
also here
Andrew.
too.
Get cross with Andrew, Carol.
The former
That's
Labour
fine.
advisor. Now, we're talking about Sadiq Khan because we think he's the world's most irritating virtue signaller.
I think he probably is, isn't he?
I completely disagree.
Yeah.
We're going to come to our ladies in just a moment, but first of all, we're going to be talking about this because the Mayor of London repeatedly, as you know, is clamping down on where we can all move because apparently we're facing a climate emergency, whether that's in a car or a plane or whatever. But guess what? He's racked up more than 80,000 air miles last year.
Of course he has. Joining us from Westminster.
Not him.
Joining us.
We'll get your opinion in a moment, Scarlett.
You can speak. Joining us from Westminster is a GBNews.com political editor, Millie Cook. Millie, this is pretty embarrassing, isn't it? Because he's extended this wretched ULEZ ultra-low emission zone, which is a tax on older polluting cars, because he says we're all choking to death because of pollution, and yet he's been using public money to fly all around the world to climate change conferences. Couldn't he just do them on Zoom?
I mean, that's exactly what his critics are saying. So Sadiq Khan did fly 80,000 air miles last year, whilst also kind of encouraging Brits not really to fly themselves. So Sadiq Khan and his team, it's sort of spread out among the team, but they took a lot of flights. However, his team is sort of pushing back, saying that he needs to travel those distances, he needs to go abroad in order to promote his own climate agenda. However, his critics are saying he's virtue signalling. He's flying across the world and he's talking about climate change, but he's not really taking the action himself. One helpful Conservative Party source pointed out that the moon is actually 240,000 miles away, and given Khan has travelled 440,000 air miles since he came to power in 2016, if he just took a few more flights for the May election, he could in fact travel there and back. However, his team have also pointed out that the previous mayor, Boris Johnson, he took 34 trips by plane in his time as London mayor. So Sadiq Khan doing just 11, it's a bit less, but obviously, given he's built such a reputation, he's put so much time, energy and political capital into promoting environmental policies, it's not the best look.
It certainly isn't. That's Millie Cook in Westminster. Well, spluttering with rage over there is Scarlett Maguire. What a hypocrite your mate Khan is.
No, so
he didn't rack up 80,000, right? It's he and his team, so there were quite a lot of...
the same
How many does he need to take with him?
Mayoral
Five of them on the team.
Why did he,
Not
why
that
did he
many.
need to take 5 people? Does he need to hold his hand?
Five people.
Hold his hand, hold his bag?
Hold on. Other people went to other places.
No, he took 5 people to New York with him.
OK, so he took 5 people to New York with him.
Why does he need that many?
I mean, I don't know, because we haven't asked Sadiq for an answer, have we? All we've got is what the Conservatives said. But what I'm saying is, for a start, there's 2 different things. ULEZ is not about climate change. ULEZ is about air pollution, which is about cars, right?
About plugging a hole in his final.
Which is ULEZ is about cars, is actually about cleaner air.
Scarlett, before you move from ULEZ, let's talk about ULEZ. His office, Khan's office, misled the public hugely by saying ULEZ had cut pollution by 29%. It had not. That was a report from the ERG, which Khan's office had funded to the tune of £800,000. The real report from Imperial College said ULEZ had cut emissions by just a piddling 3% and particulates 0. So he lied by omission to the public with that report. And the report that he wanted, that he got, was the one that his office paid for, and it misled the public.
So you're saying the fact that we are getting rid of old cars, which are polluting, right? There's no question.
Well, they're not more than 3%.
The fact that it hasn't made a difference. Well, I mean, where I live, which was the second. I mean, I did get rid of my car because it was a polluting car. And actually, it is easier to be there. But there are other problems in inner London, which is
murders. For a start.
And how does he solve those problems in inner London? We've just seen the number of murders on his
watch,
over 1,000 now. How's that helped by him flying to New York with 5 people to go to a climate change conference, which he could do on Zoom?
Because you're trying to conflate everything. You're trying to conflate everything.
I'm saying his priorities are wrong.
No. So, Scarlett, how do you stop? How do you stop?
What's it got to do with him?
So how do you stop young people, young men, killing each other?
Well, you don't do it by going to a climate change conference in New York.
You don't do it by not paying the police. He's refusing to hand over 70 million quid to the Met Police for reforms he wants put in place. He's refusing to hand that cash over, mainly because he doesn't have it. This is a bloke.
Yeah, because
you actually think this guy is a good mayor. Let me finish. You've had a say on this. This is the guy who, since 2020, has had a £6 billion bailout from the government for TfL, which he runs badly. He uses Londoners like walking cash machines. He couldn't run a you-know-what in a brewery, let alone a capital city. And he's proved that on every level, on the murders, on the pollution, and on this now. He's doing what he wants to do. He's a peacock of a man who likes to be seen on an international stage. I'm sorry, the London mayor does not need to be on an international stage.
In order to provide some balance, I feel I want to support you, Scarlett.
I think
but it's incredibly hard. I'm genuinely, I'm trying to come up with something to help you out here.
But you can't.
And I can't. But as someone who lives in London, like, what do you see as an improvement now to a few years ago?
Well, I do find, actually, that there are far fewer cars, which is really nice.
It's gridlocked.
Well, it might be gridlocked in the middle. It's actually not. It's not gridlocked.
We've just got the title of the slowest city in the world for the 2nd year running. Average speed in London, 7 miles an hour.
Let's give her an opportunity. Go on, Scarlett.
But you talk about transport for London, right? The thing is that Boris did a deal with the government that they wouldn't have to subsidise it, and then we had COVID, which absolutely killed public transport, right?
I'm sorry, that's when he got the big bailouts. He got 6 billion bailouts in 2 years.
Because he had to have it. And
don't talk about Boris's billion, because Boris was getting $1 billion a year. He got 6 over 2.5.
Because nobody was using public transport, because we all had to stay at home, but it had to go on so that people could go on, so that the key workers.
So what's his excuse now?
The key workers.
What's his excuse now? He had 2.3 billion this year. What's his excuse now? We don't have.
He's trying to keep fares down. I mean, there is a real problem about how to do it. But I just think that we conflate everything, and you know, you say, oh, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do this. I mean, she's just said Boris took 3 times as many plane trips, but that doesn't matter.
But Boris wasn't preaching about climate change the way
about the environment.
Not when he was married in Scotland. He did not. This is an entirely different.
This is a man who
tells
went
the
to
rest
court.
of us. He punishes working people by charging them for having a car that's older than 2015, and yet himself he's flying around the world in private planes and to places like New York. I'm afraid he has taken private flights. Yes, he has. Are you really latching onto the private plane thing, really? To detract from what he's actually done.
I just think you know. Look, I do my best. I still fly. That is what it's very interesting. It's what my brother said. Is all of us do our best, but actually all of us still go on with our lifestyle. I'm sure that all 3 of you fly, right? I do believe that there is a real problem with climate change, but I still believe that that you do other things about it. And I just think that all attacking Sadiq on when he takes a third as many flights as Boris Johnson did, that when we have a prime minister who likes to travel by helicopter, I mean, at least
because he's the prime minister, Scarlett, it's a little bit different.
My problem is really,
he's running a country.
Scarlett, my problem is why is the Mayor of London obsessing about climate change? He's got so many pressing issues to sort out in this great capital city of ours. Why is he grandstanding on the world stage? He went on to one climate change conference in Argentina, for God's sake. Not necessary.
Because we have to find out what we can do. I mean, it's quite interesting that you must when you.
He's a globalist. He's died in the war globalist.
He's the mayor of the capital of Britain, right? And actually, one of the things that he's done since is to say London is open, to try and get tourists and businesses coming into London.
He's not the capital. He's not the head of the capital of Britain. He's head of London. He's the head of the London of England's capital city, not the head of Britain. But do you actually really believe? Because we're not just talking about. We're linking all the other things in. You think he's a good mayor, don't you?
Yeah, I do think he's a good mayor.
So with the failure at TfL, with all of that going on, with the knife crime higher than it's ever been, you still think he's a good mayor?
I just don't understand, and I said the same when Boris was mayor. I don't understand why a mayor is responsible.
What do you think his job is?
He's the police and crime commissioner.
He's the police and crime commissioner.
That's why he's responsible.
And what he's done was he sacked a bad head of the Met, right?
And what he's done?
That's what he did. His Cressida Dick was not doing her job.
Did he bring a good one in to replace her?
I hope he has. I really hope he has. I mean,
It's not looking like it so far.
Well, it's a man who's trying to do his best, isn't he? I mean, the Met is tough,
but that's why we give him a hard time on knife crime, Scarlett. He is the police and crime commissioner.
I know, and what I said is he is the police and crime commissioner, which is why he got rid of Cressida Dick, because she wasn't doing her job properly.
And he's now refusing to give money to the Met Police that he promised them to help combat knife crime.
That he doesn't have. Right.
Because he's blown the budget a dozen times.
We've got to move on.
I think we've run out of time, but round 2 will be shortly.
We're going to talk about corporate manslaughter, which we almost had here, because that's what the former Cabinet Minister Nadine Zahawi has accused the Japanese firm Fujitsu of. They, of course, built the Horizon IT software. Do they need to be held accountable? This is Britain's Newsroom.
And cough up.
On GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Another chilly one out there today. Again, most of us will be dry. Quite a lot of cloud around. Well, we've had the clear skies in the south. It's another frosty start and a frosty clear start in north-western parts of Scotland. But elsewhere, we've seen quite a bit of cloud again. It is producing 1 or 2 light showers here and there over parts of northern England, but not really amounting to very much. As I said, most places will be dry. The feel of the day, though, will really depend on that cloud. If you're stuck under it, even though temperatures will be a little higher at 7 or 8 Celsius, it'll feel pretty cold once more. But in the sunny spells, of course, South Wales, South West England and Western Scotland, may not feel too bad, although the frost will come back pretty quickly here through this evening and overnight. Elsewhere, we'll keep a lot of cloud. That should help to prevent a frost, so it won't be as cold tonight across the south as it was last night. Most places staying above freezing thanks to that cloud, whereas it'll probably be colder across central Scotland, southern Scotland and Northern Ireland with more of a frost. Maybe some fog patches are possible too, and they could be slow to clear where they do form. Through Friday, we'll keep a lot of cloud, I suspect, over the Midlands, eastern England, and a much cloudier day in southern England as well. Again, some good spells of sunshine for Wales, particularly in the west, and probably a brighter day in eastern Scotland. Temperatures struggling here, 2 or 3 degrees at best, 5 or 6 further south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Well, thanks for that. Now, after the break, we're going to be talking to a barrister who represented some of those sub-postmasters in the Court of Appeal case in 2021. You're not going to want to miss it because he's got a lot to say. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. We are, of course, the People's Channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
.11 a.m. on Thursday, the 11th of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Andrew Pierce. and Bev Turner.
Is the nanny state going to be out of control as Labour announced today plans to introduce supervised toothbrushing for young children in free breakfast clubs? Is the state taking the place of the family?
And justice for the victims. The Prime Minister vows to right the wrongs of the Post Office scandal, but should Fujitsu, they provided the faulty computer software, pay the price?
And the ultimate, this is about the Crown, isn't it, at the moment? We were going to talk about Sadiq Khan there, but this is about the Crown. All of the kit on their movie is up for sale. It's on display in London. You can go and pick through the items that you would like to own. Not the originals, of course, owned by the royal family, but those that are featured in the Netflix series.
And we're also talking about Sadiq Khan. We just talked about him with Carol Malone and Scarlett Maguire. Is he the ultimate virtue signaller? The mayor hypocritically, in our view, flying tens of thousands of miles to climate change conferences while preaching about climate change.
Get in touch on email this morning, gbviews@gbnews.com. Let us know why you're choosing GB News. Why are you choosing this show with our record figures? More people than ever tuning in.
Absolutely right. And listening on the radio too.
And listening on the news. First, though, listening on the radio. First, though, here's your very latest news with Sam.
Bev, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning from the GB Newsroom. I'm Sam Francis. The headlines at 11. Well, Stephen Bradshaw, one of the investigation managers for the Post Office during the time of the Horizon IT scandal, is giving evidence this morning at the inquiry. These are the live pictures there. Unfortunately, he's not on the screen at the moment, but he's been defending his comments that he made in 2012, that he had absolute confidence in the Horizon IT system and that he was never told of any faults with that software. Meanwhile, the Justice Secretary says that Fujitsu should repay the government for the money that was spent on the Post Office scandal so far, if it's found culpable. It comes as the pressure grows on the firm behind the faulty software, which made it appear as though money was missing from shops. Rishi Sunak is facing 2 by-election challenges next month as the government triggers contests in Wellingborough and in Kingswood. Peter Bone lost his Wellingborough seat after being suspended from the Conservative Party when a parliamentary investigation found he had committed acts of bullying and sexual misconduct. Mr Bone, though, rejected the findings of that report. Meanwhile, former Minister Chris Skidmore has resigned from his Kingswood seat over his opposition to the government's green policies. He now says he won't support the Tories. The respective councils will shortly set a date for those votes to take place. Well, as we've been hearing, the former England boss, Sven-Göran Eriksson, says he has a year to live after being diagnosed with cancer. He was the first foreign coach to manage England and he led a golden generation of footballers, including David Beckham, Steven Gerrard, Wayne Rooney and, of course, Frank Lampard. He also led the England team to the quarter-finals of the 2002 and 2006 World Cups and the 2004 Euros. The 75-year-old told Swedish radio that he has, at best, a year to live. Authorities here in the UK are investigating reports of armed intruders boarding a vessel off the coast of Oman this morning. It comes after a Navy vessel destroyed several drones fired by Houthi rebels at ships in the region. The UK's Maritime Trade Operations Authority received reports of several intruders dressed in black military-style uniforms and masks in the early hours. They say they have since lost contact with that vessel. The UK and US governments have said any further escalation will result in retaliation. Well, earlier, the defence editor for the Evening Standard, Robert Fox, said things could get worse.
And now, one of the big changes yesterday was quantity and also quality. They attacked the main warship force for the first time in a big way. And if this goes on, they've got the target sets, they will attack Houthi bases on the Yemen mainland, on that east side of the Red Sea. You're quite right, it's an escalation.
Meanwhile, Jeremy Corbyn is in The Hague with a South African delegation for the country's case against Israel. They're accusing them of genocide. The former Labour leader is the only political figure named as part of that delegation to attend the hearings. It comes as Mr Corbyn publicly described Hamas as a terrorist group, but also accused the Israeli army of being guilty of acts of terror. Israel's president has called the case filed by South Africa as atrocious and preposterous. Political editor for the Jewish News, Lee Harpin, told GB News this morning it's an impossible situation for Israel.
No doubt Israel does need to fight back against Hamas because, you know, what would we do here in this country were missiles constantly flying in? Would we just sit back and say, well, we can't fight that force because we might kill some innocent people? Unfortunately, this is the devastating consequence of a horrendous conflict.
Well, in the last few moments, we've heard that a critical incident has been declared in London after an electric bus was engulfed in flames. Photos online show the blaze taking up much of the road, with the street cordoned off. Officers from the Metropolitan Police are advising people to avoid the area on Wimbledon Hill Road in south-west London. And they've warned to expect congestion with the road blocked off in both directions. The London Fire Brigade says that the cause of the fire isn't yet known. We'll bring you more on that as we get it. Well, bird flu has been found in elephant and fur seals near Antarctica. It's the region's first case of infected mammals. The UK's Animal and Plant Health Agency says it has been testing for the H5N1 virus on the island of South Georgia after finding dead seals there in October. Scientists say the risk to humans remains very low, but warns the virus endangers the delicate and unique ecosystems of the Antarctic. And the Princess Royal has started her second day of engagements in Sri Lanka by visiting a Buddhist temple. It's part of the Princess Anne's visit to mark 75 years of diplomacy with Britain. And she's been to the Temple of the Sacred Tooth Relic, which is the most significant Buddhist temple in Sri Lanka. The Princess will then travel to Jaffina to meet northern communities and hear about a local public library there. She'll also meet the members of the charity working to make a former civil front line safe. That's the latest from the GB Newsroom. We're across the UK on TV, on digital radio, and of course on your smart speaker. Just say play GB News. Now though, more from Andrew and Beth.
Very good morning, 11:07. So hundreds of innocent former sub-postmasters convicted in the post office scandal could have their names cleared this year.
The Postal Services Minister, Kevin Hollinrake, told the House of Commons those wrongly convicted will get the justice they deserve.
We intend to bring forward legislation as soon as we can to overturn the convictions of all those convicted in England or Wales on the basis of post office evidence given during the Horizon scandal. The Government will, in the coming days, consider whether to include the small number of cases that have already been considered by the appeal courts and the convictions upheld.
Joining us from Westminster, our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, there's pretty much cross-party agreement that this is a scandal. All parties, in my view, have got are culpable in some ways. But so far, Labour has not signed up to the detail, up to the compensation package. The initial thing is an initial payment of £75,000, because I suppose the devil will be in the detail.
The devil will be in the detail, and that's exactly what Alan Bates, the postmaster who led the charge, basically, it's due to him that this has all finally come to light, has said, though he welcomed these steps. Yes, Labour have said that they want to see the bill before they agree to support it, though I think it's likely that they will, because, of course, who would argue that these people have been massively wronged and deserve major compensation? So £600,000 for those who were convicted, and also the convictions are going to be quashed en masse. The government have said that that will happen this year, and this legislation will be brought through to Parliament in the coming weeks. Now, in terms of the speed at which things normally move in Westminster, this is lightning fast. The government have suddenly acquired this sense of massive urgency because of the outrage generated by this ITV drama, despite the fact, of course, that this is an issue that's been known about for years. These people have been fighting for justice, in some case, for decades. So the beginning of the end, if you like, in the search for justice. Also an upfront payment of $75,000 to those postmasters who weren't convicted, but nevertheless terribly wronged. The group of postmasters that went to the High Court in 2019. So lots happening. Of course, no amount of money will ever be enough, potentially. Concerns, too, about the judiciary, the fact that it is not normal, in fact, it's pretty much unprecedented for the government to tell the judiciary what to do and for the judiciary to do it. Now, Kevin Hollinrake has said that that's because this is an exceptional measure being taken in exceptional circumstances, and they will just ask the postmasters to sign a piece of paper declaring that they did not act unlawfully. If that turns in a very small number of cases not to be the case, and they did in fact defraud the Post Office, it leaves the way open to prosecute them. But lots of focus now on who should be held accountable. You know, it's supposed to be innocent till proven guilty. It seems that these postmasters were presumed guilty and couldn't prove themselves innocent because everybody just believed that the Horizon system was not at fault for many, many years. Focus now on Fujitsu specifically, calls the Justice Secretary Alex Chalk, among others, saying that if it's found in the public inquiry that Fujitsu were in the wrong, which I think is highly likely, that they should be footing the bill for compensation that's estimated to be at about £1 billion.
OK, thank you, Catherine. Catherine Forster there in Westminster. Well, joining in the studio now is a friend of the show, barrister Sam Fowles. And unbeknownst to us, Sam, when we've interviewed you before, you've actually represented some of the sub-postmasters in the appeals process in 2021. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. That was I actually took that case over 3 months before the trial. I took it over from another barrister. And on my very first day, we had to go into the Court of Appeal and argue that we should be allowed to say this isn't just an unfair trial. This is that these prosecutions should never have been brought in the first place. And I'm really pleased that we did that, because that was the decision that the Court of Appeal came to in 2021.
How were these people found guilty? Who was not joining the dots? In a situation like this, you think somebody would have gone, hang on a minute, we had all of these hard-working postmasters, sub-postmasters for years, and suddenly nearly 900 of them, over 900 of them, have all got their hands in the till. They can't, that's too big a coincidence. Why, Sam?
Well, because people made bad decisions. I don't think...
Who are those people?
Well, people at every level of the Post Office made bad decisions here. And what came out during the appeals was, and what the court found, was that instead of investigating every possible avenue and chasing down all the leads and figuring out what happened, the Post Office made up its mind about what it was going to argue and made up its mind that the blame was going on these sub-postmasters. And that was completely wrong and unjustifiable, because there were error reports with the Horizon system going back into the 90s. So we knew there was or someone knew that there were real problems with this system. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. But instead of fixing it, they covered it up by putting the blame on ordinary people.
That's a heck of an allegation, that they actually covered it up.
Well, I think they did. And the appeal court judge has effectively said the Crown Prosecution Service needs to be involved and there could be criminal prosecution. You dealt with some of these sub-postmasters. Were they broken?
God, I really struggle to sort of express this.
You've watched the series,
I've watched the series, and, you know, I was in court when those... sitting next to my clients there when the convictions were overturned, and...
It was like 39, I think, had their convictions overturned, didn't they? Something like that. Yeah.
43.
43.
43.
Okay, yeah.
And, you know, they cried, we cried. It was, we just... And the particular group that I was representing, we ended up just the five of us, you know, them and the lawyers, kind of just going into a little corner by ourselves for a little while, and to just try and process the enormity of it. Because, I mean, one of my clients was, I think, in her early 20s when she was convicted, and her entire life she'd had a dishonesty conviction hanging over her, and that's, you know, that's not like just getting into a scrap and getting a ticket. That affects your whole life.
Just on this, I spoke to Ian Warren, who's one of those postmasters who had his conviction lifted. He's 77 now, and he said he never gets this back. He handed over £18,000. He knew he hadn't done anything wrong, but in the end he accepted a guilty verdict. He got a 9-month suspended prison sentence because his lawyer said, otherwise, if you don't plead guilty, you might go to prison.
Yeah.
How shameful is that? And of course, he's got his pardon, but it can never bring back the damage done to him, his standing in the local community.
Well, how can you give back someone 20 years of their life? What amount of money can do that? And this is, this is why I've used quite strong language about it, because these were people that were going to court, and the Post Office had evidence that could exonerate them.
Yeah.
It knew that there were these error reports with Horizon, and it is, everyone, it's the first thing you learn when you become a barrister, that you give the other side all of the evidence that you've got.
In that discovery process, it's called, isn't it?
Discovery, and you do it as quickly as possible, and then you fight on fair terms. And that's what the Post Office didn't do. They never fought on fair terms.
And the headline in the Telegraph today, Post Office handed out bonuses for convictions.
Yeah. And
we've got somebody giving evidence today saying that their statements were written for them, effectively, investigators, by the Post Office's lawyers. What the hell?
I mean, this is why it's so shocking, because there was such, I think, a PR thing going on here as well. Because, I mean, looking back to when Horizon was first created back in the 90s, this was the largest non-military computer system in Europe at the time. So this was something they were really proud of. And so they didn't want people to know it didn't work very well.
No.
And this is, we're seeing the sort of reputation of the institution and the PR being put ahead of ordinary people. And I know that the Post Office as the scandal has sort of been set aside as this kind of unique thing, and everyone's saying it's the greatest miscarriage of justice. And certainly by numbers, it is. But the fact that public institutions, and indeed some private institutions, put the interests of the institution ahead of ordinary people, that's something that happens far too much.
This is an institution that's been with us for 388 and 390 years. To think it could behave like that and get away with it for quite a few years.
And totally unnecessarily as well, because ironically, if you look back, if you'd had a few headlines saying Post Office computer system doesn't work, everyone would have shrugged and gone, oh,
here we go.
Always doesn't work.
We had a big IT system thing that didn't work on Gordon Brown's watch. And we shrugged ourselves like, here we go, we're not very good at this.
It always happens. But what boggles the mind is, yes, politicians have got on board with this now. For my money, they should have got on board with this in 2021. They had a very clear statement from the Court of Appeal.
I think it should have been 10 years earlier.
I think I could probably get on board with that as well.
When Alan Bates contacted Ed Davey, the then Post Affairs Minister, and he said, what purpose would be served by a meeting? Shocking.
Yeah. And that's the theme, right, that runs through all of this, is just a lack of curiosity by people in power. A lack
of imagination, David Davis said.
And just a lack of willingness to take the side, even if all you're doing is investigating, to take the side of ordinary citizens against powerful people and go, hang on, maybe someone in power has got this wrong here. Maybe I need to look into this.
Where does this go next from a legal point of view? How do we get the people who should be stood in the dock in the dock?
Well, we need to investigate. And I was really pleased to hear last week that there's fraud investigations being opened in relation to I think,
by the police.
By the police.
Not by the Post Office themselves this time, hopefully.
And I think there's talk about the Post Office losing its power to prosecute.
It should.
Which I think is a right thing. And I think I have deep personal worries about any organisation that's not the CPS prosecuting people.
I agree.
Because it's much easier to hold the CPS to account than other people. But we need the police investigating, because the essence of fraud is, have you told a lie to get some sort of benefit out of someone? And it seems to me that there's certainly a prima facie case for investigation that a lot of people involved in this have told lies to get financial benefits.
And just finally, Sam, the Post Office Minister, Kevin Hollinrake, who's been pursuing this from the back benches for many years, I think he's been very impressive. He used an extraordinary word in the dispatch yesterday. He described the Post Office as the tactics of behaviour as malevolent. That is a really emotive, strong word. You don't expect to hear that when there's an ongoing inquiry going on, and there could be criminal proceedings. I hope there are. I think he's right. This was wicked.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, with the caveat that I want the prosecutions of people involved here to be successful, and I don't want to do anything to...
Of course, undermine it.
To get in the way of that. But, speaking politically, and it it would certainly have felt malevolent if you were on the end of it. If you had someone that is pursuing you ruthlessly and unfairly, not giving you a fair chance, that's going to feel malevolent, and that's going to just absolutely crush your any kind of hope or belief or confidence that you have in public authorities, and that's a tragedy.
And we shouldn't forget 4 of these people took their own lives, and another postmistress said she would have done if she wasn't pregnant.
Yeah, and
many lives ruined, divorces, houses sold, family savings gone forever.
I think, and again, you can't compensate that, but more than anything else, that we've got to hold people accountable.
One of our viewers, Sam, just briefly, because we've got to move on, one of our viewers has messaged here to say it is still happening. This is Leslie. She said, my sister has her wages deducted from her if her till is down. She regularly questions it, but she loses £50 to £900 every month. I strongly believe it's still happening. No one's looking into it. No one's listening. I'd be interested to see if any other people working at the post office are still having issues with this system. The system is still in place, isn't it?
Still in place. It's still run by Fujitsu. And do you know what the great irony of it is? If these convictions are quashed, the system that records convictions and convictions being quashed is also run by Fujitsu. They've had $2 billion in government contracts since 2019, when it all came out, and that's what I'm talking about.
It should all be frozen until they pay back. They should pay back every bit of compensation. Why should the taxpayer be paying for this?
Absolutely right.
Corporate world, eh? It's great for the little man.
Sam, great to have you in the studio.
Lovely to see you, Sam. Sam Fowles there. Now, still to come, as Labour announced plans to get your kids brushing their teeth at breakfast clubs and having them vaccinated in your house. Do you like the idea of a Labour nanny state? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Well, if our heads look a little bigger, this is why, because you've been saying really nice things at home this morning. We were asking you why you're watching GB News, and you've got in touch with us. And John has said this channel is so well liked because it's up to the minute and then with the news, and it brings it to us without the strings attached. It's very relaxed, and dare I say it, the presenters seem to enjoy what they do. Andrew and Bev are on at the moment, and I wouldn't miss 1 minute of their programme. All the best to all of you, including the backroom staff. Do you enjoy what you do?
Actually, I have to say, we couldn't do it without the backroom staff, and that goes across the station. The producers, young men, often young men and women, who put lots of hours into it, and couldn't do it without them.
And you know what? Gordon says, I watch GB News all the time now because you reflect what the man or woman on the street is thinking, and you share our beliefs. The so-called impartial others are left-wing woke and completely out of touch with us. And you know what, Gordon? When I speak to people who love GB News, because obviously some people absolutely hate us, but those people don't ever watch. They never watch us. People who watch this channel say, I watch GB News from morning till night. It's the only channel I have on in the day, and that does not happen. You can't say that about any other channel, whether it's ITV, Channel 4, whatever, any other news channel, because we like to entertain you, and like you say, we are enjoying ourselves.
And don't forget as well, our radio audience is growing too, because more and more times if I get in a cab, I'm a tube man most of the time, I've got to tell you, but if I'm in a black cab, not Uber, thank you, they've often got GB News on, which is great.
Yeah, and people say all the time now, they come up and they say to me in the street, we love GB News, we're so sorry you have to sit next to Andrew Pearce.
Yeah, I won't tell you what they say about
They don't really. Right, Labour plans to introduce supervised toothbrushing for children in a new health scheme.
This is all going to be announced in a speech by the leader of the opposition, no less. Plans include a 9 p.m. watershed for junk food ads, banning vape ads aimed at children. What about the vapes which are aimed at children?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm all right with both of those, though.
So we're going to talk now to the former Labour Minister, Dennis McShane. Morning, Dennis.
Good morning, and it's good to see both of you so cheerful and with all the bad news around the world, Houthis and the post office and everything.
Yeah, all that bad news, and there's your leader of the opposition banging on about how the state has got to teach children how to brush their teeth. Hasn't he got more important things to talk about, Dennis? Really? Be honest here.
As Winston Churchill said, there's no greater investment that Britain can make than putting milk into babies' bellies. And at the time, that was nanny state stuff. We have got a crisis of children's dental health. I'm going to see my granddaughter later this afternoon, and it is terrifying unless you've got private insurance, unless you're Rishi Sunak, unless you're well off, there just isn't children's dental health. There are other things too. We've got a crisis of obesity with 2 out of 5 children leaving school at the end of school years, clinically obese. And here's a funny thing. The Tories' greatest achievement, Andrew Bev, life expectancy in Britain is starting to go down slightly if we project current figures forward. Now, this isn't a nanny state. This is investing in the children of Britain, and it should be a cross-party issue.
Dennis, but you're making this party political, aren't you, in your usual way? And you know that it was getting more and more difficult to get to an NHS dentist when Labour were in power. I lost my NHS dentist 20 years ago when your lot were in government, Dennis.
If you want to bash back, you want to say everything that Tony did, Blair did and Gordon Brown did was wonderful. No, not at all. But this is now should be recognised. It's taken us, 10, 15 years to recognise the horrors of the injustice of the Horizon scandal. Must we wait another 10, 15 years, 1 or 2 more different parties in power before we realise that our children are getting some of the worst deals in the advanced world? And so it's little things like abolishing vape ads aimed at kids, no problem with that. Yes, I've got no difficulty in if parents aren't doing children's teeth, then somebody has to. That's what community, that's what society exists to do. We set up under Labour Sure Start, a hot meal for every child, abolished by David Cameron and Nick Clegg. Don't forget Liberal Democrat.
That's very good.
There he is on this. And I'm frankly, I'm not enthusiastic about everything Keir Starmer says or does, but a party that puts the children of Britain first, why not?
What about this idea, Dennis, that health visitors will be now able to go into family homes and to distribute childhood vaccination schedules in the family home? That feels a little sinister.
It does, until I go back to canvassing, knocking on doors, and MPs and the whole do go into people's home. They're invited in, and you see girls, young women who've had their legs amputated because they didn't get treatment for meningitis. I don't think you, me, certainly not Rishi Sunak, has the faintest idea of some of the levels of poverty in this country. And if we can get into those homes and just persuade mums and dads, to mums very often single mothers, like my mother was a widow, that this is what's necessary to help your child, I think that would be welcome. We power them in just after babies are born. I know I've got grandchildren arriving all the time now. And then we suddenly come to a dead stop, and it's left up to the parents.
What about this idea of a free breakfast club in every primary school as well? There'll be many families that don't need a free breakfast club. They can quite afford to pay for their own children's breakfast. The Labour are going to just be spending all the taxpayers' money on kids that don't need it.
Beverly, we did that. It was called Sure Start. And of course, it made a huge difference in my constituents. Of course, the majority of people, parents, give their children a decent breakfast and send them off to school. But there are an awful lot who can't. I mean, Marcus Rashford, there's so many great people who've insisted on it. Sadiq Khan has made that operational now in London. I think that would probably win him the election, and more than that, the ULEZ stuff. And I think that, again, is a good idea. Of course, it's not for everyone, but it made such a difference when Labour brought that in 20 years ago. And then it was unwound, especially by the Liberal Democrats who operated this ultra-right-wing, ultra-neoliberal ideology. And I think many Tories, I mean, the Tory party of Disraeli and Margaret Thatcher and Winston Churchill wouldn't have had any problems with that.
Do you have a theory, Dennis, as to why parents can't teach their children to clean their teeth anymore, or why they don't uphold it? You have to have a zero-tolerance approach in the house about brushing your teeth. Kids don't want to do it. I have a row with mine morning and night every single day. But it's a row that I'm prepared to have. Why are so many parents not having that row with their kids anymore?
I can't say you can. I've asked a question to you, Bev, because it's 1 year since I had little children. Now I've got tiny grandchildren, but I'm sure their parents will be teaching them to brush their teeth. They are already. They're making it fun. There's lots of great sort of Paw Patrol videos you can get the kids to brush their teeth. And
there's never been so much education for kids in a way about this topic. You can show them a video on your phone.
Yeah, but up or down to a point. I can take you from where I'm speaking in Westminster constituency, one of the richest places in Britain. I could walk you about a mile, go into housing association flats with single mothers with 3 or 4 children, mould everywhere, telephone wires hanging off the wall, because no repairs are done, because the Conservative government's cut all the support for housing associations, and it stinks of damp and mould, and the young mother says, OK, maybe she shouldn't have had all those children. We did. Says, we all sleep together in one room, and then I take them out at 8 o'clock in the morning and spend all of the day out of that flat. That we don't report this anymore. We just don't know the state of our own country, I'm afraid.
There's a lot of poverty at the root of a lot of this, Dennis. I don't disagree with you on that. Thank you so much, Dennis McShane there. And I have to say, that Sure Start programme was brilliant.
It was the brainchild of the late Tessa Jow, who was, it was a great woman.
Brilliant.
Great woman.
I was a new mum when that was out, and I
yeah.
remember there was a little Sure Start centre where you could go as a new mum with your baby, and there would be a health visitor, and there would be somebody that would just say, you know, I didn't need it. My mum was amazing. She was on hand. But a lot of people don't have that support, and they just say, do you know how to heat up the milk safely, or do you know how to change a nappy? And that support that we've lost as communities, it takes a village.
Yeah, it does.
Anyway.
So there we are. By the way, I brush my teeth probably 4 times a day.
You wouldn't think so. I have to sit next to you every day. I'm joking. Right, here's Ray with your morning's news.
Thank you both. It's 11:34. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Stephen Bradshaw, one of the investigation managers for the Post Office during the time of the Horizon scandal, is giving evidence at the inquiry. He's defending comments he made in 2012 that he had absolute confidence in the Horizon IT system and was never told of any faults with software. Meanwhile, the Justice Secretary says Fujitsu should repay the government for the money spent on the Post Office scandal if it's found culpable. It comes as the pressure grows on the firm behind the faulty software, which made it appear as though money was missing from shops. Rishi Sunak is facing 2 by-election challenges next month as the government triggers contests in Wellingborough and Kingswood. Peter Bone lost his Wellingborough seat after being suspended from the Tory party when a parliamentary investigation found that he committed acts of bullying and sexual misconduct. Mr Bone rejected the findings of that report. Former Minister Chris Skidmore resigned from his Kingswood seat in this week over his opposition to the government's green policies. He now says he won't support the Tories. The respective councils will shortly set a date for the vote to take place. Former England boss Sven-Göran Eriksson says he has a year to live after being diagnosed with cancer. He was the first foreign coach to manage England, leading a golden generation of footballers, including David Beckham, Steven Gerrard, Wayne Rooney and Frank Lampard. He also led England to the quarter-finals of the 2002 and 2006 World Cup and the 2004 Euros. Authorities are investigating reports of armed intruders boarding a vessel off the coast of Oman this morning. Comes after a British Navy vessel destroyed several drones fired by Houthi rebels at ships in the region. The UK and US governments have said that any further escalation will result in retaliation. The Princess Royal has started her second day of engagements in Sri Lanka by visiting a Buddhist temple. It's part of Princess Anne's visit to mark 75 years of diplomacy with Britain. The Temple of the Sacred Tooth Relic is the most significant Buddhist temple in Sri Lanka. The Princess will then travel to Jaffina to meet northern communities and hear about the local public library. You can get more on all of those stories on our website, gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Let's get you up to date with the finance. The pound will buy you $1.2756 and 1.1620 euros. Price of gold is £1,593.23. That's per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,647 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come, a new study reveals that men are less keen to share bad news than women, but are just as keen to talk about the good stuff. Have you found this to be the case? I quite like delivering good news. I don't want to talk about the bad news, do you?
No.
Well, we don't really have a lot of choice.
There's enough of it around, isn't there?
Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, and they're back in the studio for round two. Former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire and the broadcaster and journalist Carol Malone to discuss whatever takes their fancy.
Well, we've done a lot of post office, but I know you're both keen to do it again, aren't you?
Well, keen to do a bit of it. I suppose I'm keen on what's happened today. And Pierce, you touched on it before, and you were saying that, you know, these post office investigators were actually paid cash bonuses for the number of prosecutions that they got. And I mean, that just shows the culture that existed within the post. The culture of loathing for their own employees. That they weren't prepared.
Hammer them whatever.
I mean, the fact that they wouldn't ask questions about what was going on. And I suppose the other thing that has got me over this is Ed Davey. I've listened to him trying to wriggle out of responsibility over the last couple of days, and it's pretty sickening, really. He keeps on saying, you know, nothing to do with me, Gov. You know, I was misled. I didn't know. Well, he should have known. Because
you should have challenged them.
When he took the job in 2010, there was already a report that had come out the year before, which was the result of a year-long investigation, and which showed the flaws of the Horizon system. Also, there was a report 10 years before, after it was trialled in the North East, which predicted exactly what was going to happen, and it has now happened. So I just think there's a lot of people who've got a lot of questions.
Davy's been really keen to point out he's saying he was lied to and he doesn't know. He isn't here to defend himself.
He should have pushed back against. He should have said, "Why have so many postmaster missions? Why are so many being prosecuted?"
Yes.
Where was his curiosity?
No, I think it's tough, and I think it's tough that you go into government and you don't really know anything, and which is what happened. What I can't understand about Ed Davey is he's known for a very long time that he screwed up when he was in charge.
Yes.
I mean, he screwed up. There's no question about that. You say sorry, right? But why he didn't a year ago, I mean, you know, long before this television thing, there'd been inquiries, that lots of journalists have been working on this, exposing it quite rightly. And why he didn't go, look, I'm really sorry, I screwed up, and I'm now going to lead the fight. I mean, it was, instead, now, much later, though, I would like to say, I mean, I do disagree with Lee Anderson saying he's responsible for suicides. The people responsible for suicides are actually people who are working in the post office who decided to do the lying. And I do think that those people need to be exposed.
And suicide is a very complicated
It's
issue.
a very, very complicated thing. But, you know, I was doing something yesterday, and I heard this gentleman called Richard Hawkes, who had been a sub-postmaster. He ran a little shop with the post office and the thing. And he talked about how he had to admit to stealing 11 grand, which he didn't. But they closed his post office. But they said to him, if you don't... The judge in the court said to him, if you don't... He was forced to admit false accounting. The judge said, if you don't pay every penny of this back, you'll go to jail. So he had to work for the next 2 or 3 years for no money at all to pay back money that he didn't owe anybody. And where has this money that's been paid back gone?
That's what we all want to know.
Where has it gone? It was never owed, so who's got it?
Well, that's why I think Paula Venables, the chief executive, should repay her bonuses, because was the bonus calculated on the basis of some of these millions, frankly, that went back into the post office? Because some of them were paying back £30,000–40,000.
Well, and she's another one that should have apologised long ago.
Quicker.
Right. I mean, you know, maybe most of the people in Britain didn't wake up to it until the ITV brilliant drama. But people like Paula Venables, we knew. I mean, if everybody on this panel knew, she knew.
Yeah, she
knew,
did.
and there were a lot of people who needed to say sorry a long time ago.
Yes, and when you consider she has a deeply Christian faith, which is admirable, we discovered yesterday
England deacon.
She was nearly the Bishop of London. She was on the shortlist, recommended by Archbishop Welby, who was always known as got no judgment.
And where is the penitence? Where is the penitence?
The bottom line is, in fact, Scott and I were talking about this. We were saying, why didn't she apologise? And I'm guessing she was advised by her lawyers. So for her now to say that she cares about these victims, no, she doesn't. She cared more about herself. Even now, she cares more about herself than the victims of this travesty, which is in itself is shocking.
Yeah, and she said, I've listened, I've heard.
Yeah.
She's giving the CBU back. No, she's giving it back.
She was forced
before it was stripped from her by the Forfeiture Committee, which would have been humiliating.
A million people signed that.
In a few days.
I mean, it is. I mean, that's what's so shocking is the lack of penitence of a lot of people, right?
But do you know what I found sickening yesterday was to hear Davey talking about how we must concentrate on the victims, these poor victims. This is only to deflect attention from himself. And, you know, the Lib Dems wheeled out a woman called Christine Garbutt yesterday, who works in the Cabinet Office, and she was saying Davey is guilty of nothing. And she was going on about these poor victims. I said, he had his chance to look after these poor victims.
Well, he told Alan Bates there was no purpose to be having a meeting with.
Exactly. And then she brought up this thing, and I'm hoping people check this out. I'm hoping the media check this out. You know, she said, he did meet Alan Bates. I said, well, when did he meet him?
Eventually he did.
Eventually, but she couldn't give me a date, so she's been told this. But they're wheeling people out. And, you know, the thing about this, it's so bad for the Lib Dems, because I think they've got some by-elections coming up. And, you know, the only question people are going to be asking on the doorsteps now is...
What role did you play in this? Yeah, absolutely.
So it's done.
Talking of victims, let's look at this Bibi Stockholm story. So the Albanian asylum seeker who we believe he took his own life, Scarlett, in December, 12th of December. His roommate has spoken to the BBC, and he has said that unless there are changes, there will be more people taking their lives on the Bibi Stockholm. He said the list of complaints, he's not on there anymore, but he said he gets messages to say that the showers are cold and it has unreliable Wi-Fi on the boat and poor quality food.
But I'm kind of say, not everyone in this country has good Wi-Fi. You go to certain parts of the country, you can't get Wi-Fi. They're getting it free.
I also thought about the cold showers, actually, as I froze in my house.
There we are.
No. I think it's awful to I think the problem with... I mean, these people shouldn't be on the Bibi Stockholm because we should have a decent asylum system that actually
we don't.
has sent. But yeah, but has.
So where do they go?
Has sent the Albanian home, right? Because actually, you know,
because he shouldn't have been here anyway.
He should have been. All these people should have been processed, right? And it is ridiculous that we are paying £8 million a day to put people up in hotels. God knows how much.
But can I say, you say that, but, you know, we're talking like life on this boat is hell on earth. No, it is not. You know, our Navy lives on boats like this in conditions exactly like this. And when people come to this country illegally, what on earth do they expect? Do they really think it is our job to give them great Wi-Fi? You know, this guy who shared a room with the poor unfortunate who killed himself, you know, it's too easy to say he killed himself because of the conditions of the Bibi Stock. Of course he didn't. This guy was from Albania. He wasn't from a war-torn country. His mental health issues were not because he was fleeing war and persecution. He had other things wrong. But, you know, to cite as examples of people harming themselves, cold showers and bad Wi-Fi, please, you know, are we supposed to feel sorry?
There would have been suicides too amongst people accommodating some of these hotels.
There have been, absolutely.
And there would have been problems with the showers in some of these hotels too. But they don't have a gym and a games room in these hotels, unlike the Bibi Stockholm. Well, do they?
Some of them do.
What I'm saying is that that is unnecessary. But I mean, you read it, and they do. The problem is, so some people shouldn't be there, and some people are fleeing persecution, and those fleeing persecution do have, you know, they have serious mental health problems. They shouldn't.
But they don't have a right to great Wi-Fi.
No, I'm not.
Seriously,
Carol, that's not what I'm saying.
But this is what
Carol,
the problem.
what I'm saying is that if we process them properly, that actually we'd send the people home who shouldn't be here, and the people who are here, we need to look after them. That they don't get put in.
Scarlett, if we try to send people home who shouldn't be here, there's an outcry.
Well, there's
a court case.
There's an appeal.
People are stopped.
Actually, they are being. I mean, the whole thing is that once they started sending people back to Albania, the Albanians stopped coming.
That's true.
So if you're talking about things that work, it's actually having a proper process. No, of course you can't send people back to a war-torn country. Look, I've had a refugee from the Yemen living with me. I've got somebody moving in from the Sudan next week. Those people cannot go back.
Good.
No, well, I mean, there's no point in me sort of virtue signalling.
Do you get any government support for that?
No, of course not. I say I don't want Ukrainians. I want people where you don't get government support. But I mean, there is no question that those people they come over. They're quite desperate. And actually, what's incredible about them is they try and go to college, and within years, a few years, they'll be taxpayers.
But good on you for what you're doing. It's amazing. But it's fantastic what you're doing. But people, we've got to stop pretending that the Bibi Stockholm is hell. It's not. They have everything they need on there.
They don't.
Everything.
No. But what I'm trying to say is the problem is a lot of them are very traumatised. They shouldn't be in a place like that, right? They should be being processed.
But don't you accept, Scarlett, come on, be honest, deep down, some of these are economic migrants, young men in their 30s.
That's why I'm saying they should be processed.
In which case they should be processed and sent back.
That is my argument, is they should be processed.
Can we... I want you to defend, Scarlett, Keir Starmer talking about the fact that brushing kids' teeth is the school's responsibility.
Nanny states.
No,
Nanny states.
There is an incredible problem that actually, for the under-10s, the biggest reason for them going to hospital is terrible, terrible teeth.
Yeah,
so what do you say? We'll ignore it, or do you say to the schools, actually, can we look at this is the tinies coming in and how they brush their teeth? How are we going to stop dental decay?
It's not a teacher's job, it's a parent's job. It is. Teachers are not paid to teach kids how to brush their teeth. They're paid to teach the 3 hours. This is a parent's job. This is a dereliction of duty from parents. I'm sorry. If you have a child, you have to be able to tell them to brush their teeth, and if you're not prepared to do that,
can I just say we're getting a lot of teachers emailing saying it will be a relief for teachers to show the children how to clean their their teeth. It will give us permission to intervene without fear of recrimination.
And it's not
They said, because, for instance, you can't have a knit nurse. When my kids have had knits over the years, I've said to the teachers, please get the knit nurse. And they say, we can't embarrass the children by pointing out that they've got knits.
We had knit nurses when I was a kid.
So we have to, exactly. And a little bit of me thinks, if we need this, then we need to not embarrass the children and say, right, you've all got to clean your teeth.
Yeah, and
it should be parents, but they're not doing it.
We're talking about 4-year-olds. And what are you saying? So that if you've got a bad parent, that's your problem, right?
I'm saying that parents should be the ones addressing this problem, not teachers.
Carol, but they're not. And there are a lot of parents who are not doing it, and so rather than the children going to school, going to hospital with decaying teeth, right, what they're saying is, let's teach the children how to... I mean...
So parents don't really have any responsibility for the kids they bring to the world?
that's not what I'm
saying. Well, it kind of is, because you're giving them a pass on teaching their kids.
Is the debate we're going to be having between now and the election. Whose responsibility is the family? Right, that's it from Britain's Newsroom. Up next, good afternoon,
I'm going
Britain,
off to brush my tooth, by the way.
with Tom and Pip. He doesn't really have bad breath. We'll see you next week. Here are Tom and Pip.
Good afternoon. I'm glad I brushed my teeth this morning.
So am I, otherwise we would be in trouble. Listen, we're going to be talking about the resumption of the Post Office inquiry. All eyes are on it today as a Post Office investigator gives evidence and denies that he and other investigators behaved like mafia gangsters.
We're also going to be turning our eyes to the Royal Navy. Ships currently in the Red Sea being attacked by Iran-backed rebels. What does that mean for Britain?
And it is getting colder again, this Arctic blast. Here's the latest forecast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Another chilly one out there today. Again, most of us will be dry. Quite a lot of cloud around. Well, we've had the clear skies in the south. It's another frosty start and a frosty clear start in north-western parts of Scotland. But elsewhere, we've seen quite a bit of cloud again. It is producing 1 or 2 light showers here and there over parts of northern England, but not really amounting to very much. As I said, most places will be dry. The feel of the day, though, will really depend on that cloud. If you're stuck under it, even though temperatures will be a little higher at 7 or 8 Celsius, it'll feel pretty cold once more. But in the sunny spells, of course, South Wales, South West England and Western Scotland may not feel too bad, although the frost will come back pretty quickly here through this evening and overnight. Elsewhere, we'll keep a lot of cloud. That should help to prevent a frost, so it won't be as cold tonight across the south as it was last night. Most places staying above freezing thanks to that cloud, whereas it'll probably be colder across central Scotland, southern Scotland and Northern Ireland with more of a frost. Maybe some fog patches